Complaints matter because they're a great way to understand what happens when our services don't work for the people we care for. They matter to us as an organisation because it's an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to look at something that didn't work and to understand why it didn't work and to find out what we can do to get better at it. And it also matters to our regulators as well. They look to see whether we're the kind of organisation that takes complaints seriously or whether we try to sweep them under the carpet.
I've been using Coggins services since 2013. I've been inpatient. I've used community services. I'm currently a member of Bromley Research Net. The impact of not having a complaint handled well is that you're feeling all them emotions of invalidation, hurt, rejection. They come in huge waves. It's like a tsunami of emotion that comes, and you just feel, why do I bother?
So once we've received a complaint or concern from somebody, we have a timescale of 3 working days to acknowledge receipt. We would normally try to do this by telephone, contact them in person to ask them how they would best like their complaint dealt with. We would try to also get a manager to call that person to see if we can resolve it quickly over the telephone, as opposed to going through meetings or letters. But it's all about how they would like it best addressed, and what would actually resolve it for them, what it is they're expecting from the complaints process or from raising concerns with us.
One of the biggest fears for people who complain, and I've heard this on several occasions from people I've met, and my own feeling as well, is that you feel that perhaps the next time you may be able to access services, you're going to be seen, you're going to have your treatment refused.
I think complaints are important from a clinician's perspective because actually it's a way of seeing our practice from the outside. I've done a lot of complaints and I'm fascinated by hearing about areas of the service that I've not been involved with, but also just getting service users' view on us is just really helpful in a variety of ways.
I realise that not all complaints are factually correct. In certain ways they've been investigated, etc., and the points raised may not be factually true or not factually accurate. But I think it's important that the person who sent the complaint in feels they've been heard, feels they've been listened to, feels they've been validated, and that it's responded to in a professional but caring way.
Once the complaint's been acknowledged and we've discussed with the service user or their family how they would best like their complaint taken forward, we would then begin our investigations. We would send it out to the director of the service that the issues have been raised about and ask them to identify somebody to investigate the complaint. That may be the person whose service it is, a service manager, or it's more likely to be somebody independent so that we can have a non-biased, independent view of what's happened in the service.
One of the things that I've found most helpful is actually a phone call. But that way you can have a conversation with that person, a two-way conversation, an adult conversation, and that person can feel totally validated. I use that word again, validation. I think it's so important. And they can feel they've been heard. And they can raise some points that maybe they thought about after they've written the letter and go, oh, I should have put that in. They can raise that. And it can sort of bring a closure.
I think it's essential that the person who raised the complaint is involved. And when I say involved, that means ringing someone up, arranging a meeting, having a discussion, because very often the complaints come from fear, they come from anxiety. And I think a lot of that is dealt with face-to-face. And I'll be honest, I'm using a lot of my clinical skills when I do that. So I don't see it as 100 miles away from what I do in my day job. But I really enjoy that process of just trying to understand the emotional basis of a complaint as well as the factual basis, because we need to take account of both, because many service users can experience fear and anxiety in using our services. I also think when you interview staff, you use the same skills because people become very anxious when there's a complaint. And I just enjoy trying to make sure that it's a decent experience for everyone in that.
There often there's a lot of fear, both sides, when a complaint comes in. You know, someone's sent you a letter, complained about you, so they've sent in something which can be quite scary for them to write. You've met something, and it's fear meets with fear. And there's this problem there with fight or flight, and somebody you want to disappear off and you don't want to reply to that letter and whatever. that can actually escalate the problem further. The problem could become even bigger. That person then complains to someone higher than you. You then get someone knocking on your door asking you questions. And I think it's important, meet that fear with fear and head on and have a chat with that person. And I think 80% of the time, you'll de-escalate the problem very, very quickly.
I think a lot of us worry about having complaints made about us. And I think being involved with complaints helps you to understand it's a rational process. But also it gives you a chance to make sure that the person who's complained and the staff have something of a compassionate experience. And I think if staff are worried about whether this is a fair or compassionate process, this is a really good way of making sure that it is.
I may come across when I complain that Mr. Angry, Mr. Upset, Mr. Emotional, Mr. Can't handle you to professionals. But what I would say is to all professionals involved in a complaint is humanise it, become a human, lean in, help that person, listen to what they have to say, and you can probably de-escalate it so quickly by just putting the human touch onto it.
Complaints are our chance to show that we do care when we get things wrong and that we want to learn from those mistakes. We do ask staff who are very busy clinically and operationally to make time to investigate complaints for us and to find out what's happened and to make that response. But it says something important about us as an organisation and about us as people that we take the time to do this.
I think what I would want to say to all of our investigating officers or anybody participating in the investigation of a complaint is please don't be afraid. It is just a fact-finding mission. That's what we're trying to do, is find out what happened, why did it happen, and what we can do to prevent it again. And then to share the learning amongst all of the services to make sure improvements happen.
One thing that's really important to bear in mind is also an opportunity for us to say sorry. To say sorry that someone had a poor experience with us. And we have to be clear, that's not the same as saying we're admitting liability. I know people worry about this thing, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with us as an organisation saying you've had a poor experience with Oxleys and we are sorry that this has been your experience of that.